I'm Newswatch 16 Stacey Lang. Welcome back to another episode of Case of Interest Kohberger. It's been a few months since we saw you here on Case of Interest because there wasn't much to share in the Bryan Kohberger Idaho murder case. But this week not only marks the 1-year anniversary of Kohberger's arrest, and when this national story that has affected so many people became a local story to us here on Newswatch 16 with the arrest of Monroe County native Bryan Kohberger. But there's also some updates to share in the case, and we thought it was due time to go over some of those updates. But before we talk about what's going on now, we want to start from the very beginning. And remember the lives that were lost on November 13th of 2022, and also explain to you how we got to where we are now. So let's take a look back.
A Saturday night out is not unusual for college students, and this November weekend didn't seem any different. 20-year-old Ethan Chapin and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Dana Kernodle, spent the night at a fraternity party, returning home around 2 in the morning. 21-year-old Kaylee Gonzalez and her lifelong best friend, 21-year-old Madison Mogan, were at a bar in their Idaho college town. The girls then stopped at a food truck and headed home. The two other roommates were also inside the house along King Road in Moscow. Then around 4 in the morning, one of the roommates heard a noise. She brushed it off, thinking it was Kaylee playing with her dog, until she heard another noise and looked out of her bedroom door. She told investigators she heard crying and saw a figure wearing black clothing and a mask walk past her and towards a sliding glass door. Police say the roommate stood there, frozen in shock, and locked her bedroom door. The next morning, police responded to the home. When they arrived, they found the bodies of Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison. All four were stabbed to death.
You can't imagine sending your girl to college and then they come back and her.
Fear on campus grew over the next few weeks while police combed through hundreds of tips, but no arrests were made. Until the morning of December 30th, authorities arrested Bryan Kohberger at his parents' home in Chestnut Hill Township near Broadheadsville.
These murders have shaken our community, and no arrest will ever bring back these young students. However, we do believe justice will be found through the criminal process. This was a very complex and extensive case. We had developed a clear picture over time.
Kohberger, a Monroe County native, was a graduate student at the time of the murders, studying at Washington State University, only about 15 minutes away from the victim's home in Idaho. The 28-year-old drove a white Hyundai Elantra, the same car police say they found on multiple security cameras the night of the murders. According to the affidavit, the sedan passed by the victim's home 3 times, then on a 4th, stopping, only to take off a few minutes later at a high speed. This is the time frame in which the police believe the murders took place. It was a few weeks later that police announced they were looking for a car spotted near the murder scene. A tip was called in from Washington State University saying a car that matched the description belongs to a student who lives on campus, Bryan Kohberger. He also matched the description one of the surviving roommates gave to police. Then, what might be the biggest break in the case? Investigators say a knife sheath was found underneath one of the victims, and the Idaho State Lab later found a single source of male DNA on the button snap. The DNA didn't match anyone in the National Criminal Database, so FBI agents compared it with DNA shared publicly on genealogical research websites, and the DNA pointed investigators to Kohberger. Officers in the Poconos then collected DNA from outside his family's home. The DNA from the trash matched Kohberger's father, and investigators say that sample matched the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath at the crime scene. A third match was made with Kohberger himself after his December arrest.
The chances that this DNA came from someone other than the suspect are just astronomically slim.
A few days into the new year, the accused killer was in Monroe County Court for an extradition hearing. He agreed to be taken back to Idaho to face charges. Pennsylvania State Police flew him across the country the next day. Then the day the families of Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison had waited for. The day their accused killer was in an Idaho courtroom. After Kohberger waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing, a judge set a date for late June, but that day would never come. In May, a grand jury indicted him on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. During his arraignment, Kohberger was asked how he pleads, but he didn't respond. His lawyer told the judge they would be standing silent. The judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. In late June, the state of Idaho announced it would pursue the death penalty. Bryan Kohberger's trial was set to begin last month, but just 6 weeks beforehand, he waived his right to a speedy trial, delaying the proceedings indefinitely. His defense team tried to get the charges against him thrown out, arguing that the grand jury indictment was flawed, a judge ultimately deciding in the state's favor. Earlier this month, a Latah County judge decided the state must turn over all investigative genetic genealogy in the case by December 1st, something the defense says they need for trial. But a trial date has yet to be set. A gag order has been in place since Kohberger's arrest, meaning investigators and lawyers cannot talk about the case publicly. As a result, many details remain unknown, including what, if any, connection Kohberger has to Ethan, Xana, Kaylee, and Maddie. The college house in Moscow, Idaho that was once home to the victims remains boarded up. It now belongs to the University of Idaho. The school intends to knock it down. Until then, it serves as a constant reminder of what happened inside.
That was a story we put together for the anniversary of the murders on November 13th. We now know that the King Road house, its days are numbered. This very week, scheduled for December 28th, the University of Idaho plans to begin demolition of that home with a desire, officials say, to tear it down before the start of the spring semester and remove it because it stands as a reminder to what happened there, and can be obviously very painful for students at the University of Idaho to see. Some family members of the victims, particularly the Gonzalez family, fought that demolition several times with petitions and court orders because they believe that the house should remain as evidence until the trial is completed and this case has a resolution, just in case any other evidence needs to be collected from there. It seems those efforts have failed and the demolition is set to go forward. We will have updates on that demolition on Newswatch 16 this week. There's also some new developments in the case we want to talk about. That story also mentioned that the judge has denied Kohberger's motion to have his grand jury indictment thrown out. We can take a quick look at that public order that came down last month, where the judge writes, Kohberger has failed to successfully challenge the indictment on grounds of juror bias. That was one of his arguments. Lack of sufficient admissible evidence and prosecutorial misconduct, rather. He was indicted by an impartial grand jury who had sufficient admissible evidence to find probable cause to believe Kohberger committed the crimes alleged by the state. So that is a blow to the defense. That grand jury indictment will not be thrown out, but new documents filed just days before Christmas indicate that Kohberger's public defender, Ann Taylor, and her team are not giving up this plan to try and get the indictment thrown out. There are records that are sealed now that indicate that he's still trying. Kohberger is still trying to get his grand jury thrown out and potentially get a stay in proceedings as well. On the other hand, the prosecution is trying to move things forward. There was a motion for scheduling the trial filed earlier this month here in December, where prosecutors ask the judge to schedule the trial for the summer of 2024. We know that the prosecution believes the trial is going to last about 6 weeks, and their main desire for having it in the summer of next year is not only to give the victims' families a faster resolution to this case, but also because Moscow High School is right across the street from the Latah County Courthouse, and they wish to do this at a time when the school kids are not in school, because there will be, as we can anticipate, intense media attention surrounding Kohberger's trial. We have yet to hear when that's going to happen. That's something that we're paying close attention to and will continue to follow. You can find updates always here on Case of Interest Kohberger. And this week surrounding the 1-year anniversary of Kohberger's arrest in Monroe County, we'll have coverage online and on WNEP and Newswatch 16. So stay tuned for another episode of Case of Interest Kohberger.